One of the things that we like to do is present models that are out there about change. And one of the popular ones that is out there, some of you may have actually seen this book, heard about it, or even read this book. It's by John Cotter, and it's called Our Iceberg is Melting. We recommend, if you have some time after the class, this is an easy book to pick up. It's a lot of cartoons. It's essentially a story. And it goes through the model that John Cotter developed for change, which is an 8-stage model that we'll be getting into. But he presents it in terms of a story about penguins and how they had to learn to change in order to survive. So we can't go through the details of all of this, but what we have done and what we are getting ready to do, we have a little treat for you. We have turned Our Iceberg is Melting into a 1-act short play. And all of the people that helped design this session today will be playing roles as penguins. And so we have 6 characters, all of whom are penguins, and we are going to be doing a dramatic interpretation of the entire book, Our Iceberg is Melting. Upon a time, there was a colony of penguins living on an iceberg in the Antarctic. They loved their iceberg. They had plenty of food in the surrounding sea, and the walls of the iceberg gave them shelter from the winter storms. They'd always lived there, and they were going to live there forever. Until one day, everything changed. It all started with Fred. So Fred was a little unusual as penguins go. He spent all of his spare time making meticulous observations and writing them down in his little black notebook. He was becoming a little alarmed that cracks in the iceberg were becoming more numerous and that the water was pouring through and forming little lakes. After checking his notes, he came to a very startling conclusion.
These cracks are getting bigger and the melting ice is coming through. All of my observations can only mean one thing. Our iceberg is melting. What do I do?
Well, Fred knows he has to tell someone who has some authority. He can only think of one person that he knows who has high status in the colony, and that would be Alice. Alice is on the leadership council, and she's a little different from the other penguins. Indeed, she's not arrogant and behaves in a very altruistic way with all of her colleagues. And that's why Fred decides to talk to her and explain his fears.
Alice, I've got to talk to you about something very, very serious.
Fred, right? You're the penguin with the notebooks. What's so important?
Alice, I've been checking my observations on all the 2,526 cracks in our home, and I've rechecked all of my numbers for the last 3 months. And our iceberg is melting. It's really melting. This is urgent. We must do something now.
All right, calm down, Fred. Take a breath and let's start from the beginning. What's all this about?
So after Fred went through his 42 pages of graphs and charts, Alice begins to realize the gravity of the situation and asks Fred to show her what he's been seeing. Alice knew there was something serious, and she promised Fred that she would talk to Lewis, the head penguin, to convince the leaders of the urgency of the situation.
I honestly thought that Fred had probably been eating a few too many funny squid, and I decided to humor him. But after inspecting some of the larger cracks that Fred pointed out, I can see why Fred is concerned. I think you should invite Fred to the next council meeting to explain his observations.
Oh, well, okay. I guess it can't hurt to have him explain what has him so upset. So that Wednesday, Fred made his presentation to the council. They were some of the best PowerPoint slides I'd ever seen. Lots of colors and graphs flying in from all sides. And oh, really, it was very nice. Anyway, after a great deal of debate, there was a general agreement that there was definitely a problem and something had to be done. Now, I'm a pretty good leader and a fair politician. I knew just what to do. I immediately appointed a committee. Knowing problem solving works better in teams, I appointed the best team I could think of. These 5 penguins were the perfect combination of knowledge and skills, and together they were the very best team to solve our problem. And I appointed the smartest penguin in the colony to lead the group. That would be Jordan. Um, Professor, I need you to lead this team and figure out what to do about Fred's melting iceberg problem.
Well, of course I will lead this group. There is no one else with the same qualifications or my superior intellect, and this makes the most logical choice.
Well, in reality, Jordan, the others call her Professor, is already compiling a list of the other team members' talents and skills. So after a couple of minutes, this is what she came up with.
Fred is very curious and creative. He has a nice beak, has affinities with the youngest of the clan. Me, I'm very logical and educated. I'm capable of solving any problem. Alice has a strong character, always achieves her goals and considers everyone equally. Buddy is adorable, doesn't always have both flippers in the water, but everybody still loves him. And Lewis is the glue, experienced, a little conservative, but generally well respected. And with this diverse team of penguins, we should be able to have this problem solved within a month.
Well, I was really pretty pleased with my brilliant move of forming a team and turning the whole thing over to the professor. So I stood back to see what would happen. And so did the rest of the team. After some general chit chat and attempts at high fives for being picked on such an important team, although they really didn't understand the significance of the 5 and the high fives not having fingers and all, it was Buddy who came up with the brilliant plan for the rest of the day.
Hey, I'm hungry. Is anybody else hungry? Let's hit the water for a nice big lunch.
And so, just a few hours after the team was formed, they made their very first big team decision. They spent the rest of the day gorging themselves on squid and fish. Then they decided to make a fresh start of it in the morning. So the next morning, Fred led the team to the cracks that he had shown Alice, and their iceberg really was melting.
See, I told you, these cracks look worse now than when Fred showed them to me the other day. We've got to do something now.
The professor decided it might be a good idea to use the same strategy that Fred had used to find the problem in the first place. And so they all started walking around the iceberg and observing, making notes on what they saw. After half a day of intense observing, they hadn't observed a solution. It was getting late and they were becoming a little discouraged when...
Hey, look up there. Maybe that's the solution.
A seagull?
It had to come from somewhere.
Well, a seagull that size can only stay aloft for 15 minutes for every 40 grams of body weight. That's about 2.5 hours.
So we're going to learn to fly?
No, buddy. You're going to talk to the seagull and find out where it came from.
Well, Buddy was known to be very friendly, but he'd never actually talked to a seagull before. In fact, he wasn't even sure he spoke gull. But off he went, and he came back a short while later with some interesting news.
Buddy, what did you find out?
I found out his name is Melvin. Oh, and he's a scout for his flock of gulls. He and a bunch of other scouts regularly fly around looking for new places for the flock to live. They never stay in the same place for very long. They're always looking for somewhere that has more food, better nesting areas, and are places without predators.
That's it. That's the solution to our problem. We'll look for another iceberg. In fact, we'll become nomadic like seagulls, and we won't have to worry about icebergs melting from right underneath us ever again.
Well, the others nodded in agreement, and with the breakthrough, I decided it was time to call an assembly of the whole colony to let them in on our brilliant solution. And at the assembly of the entire Empire Penguin colony, the team shares their solutions on the melting iceberg issue. The professor carefully watched the colony and listened to their reactions. In the end, the professor summed up their differing reactions this way.
About 10% were all in, 20% could see a new way of living, 30% were still digesting this new information, 30% were skeptical but not hostile, and 10% were convinced this was completely absurd.
I don't know what everyone is so panicked about. We've always lived here and nothing has ever happened. No need to do anything. Everything will be okay.
Well, it was clear from the professor's assessment that they still had some work to do to get everyone on board with their plan.
What do we do now? We really don't have time to wait until everyone is in agreement.
Alice is right. We really can't force everyone to like our idea.
I can't really charm them all into agreeing with us.
Maybe we don't have to charm them or force them. We have a lot of them who are already on board and ready to do something. Let's start with those guys.
The professor was right, as usual. They could start with the members of the colony who were ready to act and worked on the others a little later. They found some who wanted to be scouts and some who were willing to work on ways that the whole colony could move together, and some would make plans for organizing the colony in their new home. These, we'll call them champions of change, were ready to get to work, and that's just what they did.
No, I'm not going anywhere. Everything is fine. There really is no need for all this fuss.
Several days later, when Fred and Buddy came back from their very first scouting voyage, we all celebrated their discovery of finding suitable possibilities for a new home. The professor and her team decided to hold a parade in their honor. The whole colony turned out for this celebration. They're always up for a party.
Phew, being a hero is a lot of work, but it sure feels great. It looks like more penguins are getting on board with our move. I hear them talking about our new iceberg, what our new iceberg will be like.
Seems like a lot of wasted energy. While you all are running around, I'm enjoying another lovely day on our iceberg.
Well, a few days after the parade, Buddy led the second wave of scouts, and they reported that they had found a great new home for the colony. It had very few cracks and other signs of melting. It had tall snow walls to protect them from the storms. It had a variety of fish and other tasty things to eat. And there were smaller icebergs all along the way to make travel easier for those that were a little bit more vulnerable.
Hey, Lewis, what do you want me to do with the new volunteers? I had 5 more this morning.
Well, that's great. I just met some young mothers who want to organize the chicks to keep them safe along the way. Organizational planning is moving along very well.
On the waddle over here, I also met up with a bunch of my friends and their friends too to describe the new iceberg and its benefits.
It sounds like we've gotten most of the details for our move taken care of. Communicating the vision and strategy is going well. However, I still hear from several in the colony who think it's making too much of the cracks in our iceberg. They're certain that this move is going to be a disaster.
Is everybody ready? Let's go.
Bye, everybody. You all have a lovely swim. I'll be waiting right here when you get back. Everything is going to be fine. You'll see.
In the end, the colony made it off the melting iceberg before their deadline. They were quite content and happy as they settled into their new iceberg home. They weren't sure when, but they knew that they would probably have to move again. They created an entire team of scouts who ventured out regularly, always on the lookout for a better place to live. You see, change happens, not just for penguins. We can't control change. Eventually, all of the icebergs melt. Adapting to change involved everyone, not necessarily all at once, and there were many different roles to play to make it successful. The end. Thank you.